Hello, true believers. This is Doc Hogg, and welcome to episode 7 of Comics and Variety. Not long ago, I was in a Barnes & Noble. I was looking through the comic book section, surprise, and I decided, since that we are nearing the premiere of the Shazam movie, why not buy a Shazam comic book? And so I decided to buy this one. It is written and illustrated by Jeff Smith. It's called Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil. And almost from page 1, I regretted buying this graphic novel. It might be worthwhile for you to get down on your knees just briefly and say a little prayer that the Shazam movie in absolutely no way takes its cue in anything from this graphic novel. That's how bad this is. Jeff Smith, his previous work was something called Bone, which I have not read, and after reading this novel, I have absolutely no desire to ever read Bone. This graphic novel, the plot is bad. There's all sorts of holes and inconsistencies in this graphic novel. I'm going to cover those and then those two things in the next two videos. But today I want to cover the politics. This book came out in 2007, and it's really full-on social justice warrior. And it's fair to say that the politics of this are absolutely juvenile. So let's get to it. One of the very first pages here, Billy Batson is in his abandoned apartment. He's watching this little television, and the news on the television is reporting, quote, "Just weeks after losing the election to his dead opponent's wife, it looks like the former industrialist's political career has been saved. Confirmation hearings for the new attorney general have been faster than expected." Now, this character that the news is referring to here is actually going to be one of the villains in the story. In fact, it's Dr. Savannah. But what this is kind of a reference to here, if you go back maybe about 18, 19 years, is actually Republican John Ashcroft. He was senator of Missouri, and he was defeated for re-election in 2000. He was facing the former governor of Missouri, or actually I think he was the sitting governor of Missouri, Mel Carnahan, and right before the election, Carnahan died in a plane crash. And then Carnahan's wife, Jean, stepped in his place, and she beat him. She beat Ashcroft. Ashcroft lost the election, and then when George W. Bush was elected president, he tapped Ashcroft to be Attorney General, which was a pretty good choice because Ashcroft had been a lifelong attorney. He had actually been at one point Attorney General of Missouri. And he was never an industrialist, as is suggested here. But of course, being an industrialist, that's going to come back later on in the book. So let's move on here. And here, of course, is the Attorney General in the story, Dr. Savannah. He's going to turn out to be one of the villains. And here he's saying, "You have my personal assurance that the Department of Technology and Heartland Security will go through the credit accounts of every citizen until we find something suspicious." So yeah, there you have one of the lefty tropes of the war on terror, is that the government was snooping into every little nook and cranny of our personal business. Okay, moving on now. So in this scene, these two big giant monsters have shown up in Central Park, and Shazam and his sidekick Mary Marvel. Mary Marvel will actually turn out to be Shazam's sister. They have discovered that these monsters are in fact robots. And in this later scene, they have Billy Batson and Mary Marvel have been captured by Dr. Savannah and his henchmen, and they're letting Dr. Savannah know that they're not actually, these monsters in Central Park are actually robots. And here we see Dr. Savannah. He's saying robots are just machines, tools for powerful men, tools of war. And war is profitable. Another lefty trope about the war on terror. The war on terror was just all about oil and making sure oil companies were profitable, and George W. Bush was involved in oil companies before he entered politics. So that's really what this is all about. Don't be too subtle here, Jeff Smith. Okay, next up, Dr. Savannah has deputized these two thugs who have previously in the book been bullying Billy Batson. And he takes them to Central Park, to the robots, and he wants them to run toward the robots when this probe comes out of one of the robots. And to get them to do it, he says, "What are you waiting for? Do you want the terrorists to win?" And, of course, these two knuckleheads fall for it. "Hell no, terrorists can't come into my town without a fight. Yeah, let's kick their asses." I remember Dick Cheney, John Ashcroft, George W. Bush saying that all the time to get the American public to support the war, to be gung-ho about it, constantly saying, if you don't support our policies, well, you're going to be letting the terrorists win. And then finally, with regard to the politics of this graphic novel, Dr. Savannah, of course, being an industrialist, he wants the technology from these robots so he can produce weapons to make money off of it. And a little later on, Billy Batson is talking to one of the other characters in the story, Talkie Tawny, and Billy Batson is saying that Dr. Savannah is going to build special weapons and sell them to the army so he can make a fortune. And then Tawny responds, "War profiteering, that is immoral and illegal. We can stop him, Billy." Ultimately, I think it's fair to say that the politics of this graphic novel are laughable. It's heavy-handed. It's shoved right in your face. It's not subtle at all. Clearly, Jeff Smith has an adolescent left-wing view of the war on terror. It had nothing to do with two planes being flown into the Twin Towers and the Twin Towers collapsing and 3,000 people dying, not to mention Flight 93 and the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. The war on terror has nothing to do with that, or if it does, well, that's just an excuse. So war profiteers and so forth can go to war and make money on it. It's just an excuse for this the warmongers in our society to do what they want to do. And not only that, and as we're going to see tomorrow, the politics of this graphic novel really came at the expense of the plot. I mean, the plot is terrible. There are loads of plot holes, and it's hard to follow at times and know exactly what's going on. But that's typical of SJWs. Never let the plot get in the way of the political message that you want to shove in people's faces. There will be no Hogs headlines today. Instead, I want to pay tribute to my uncle, Jack Montaldo, who our family lost very recently. Passed away in February. He was born in 1954. He was the second brother and number 4 of 6 children. He was born in Sonoma, grew up there. Uncle Jack, as he grew up, he initially followed my grandfather Charlie into working at the post office, but he eventually switched over to working at the Sonoma French Bakery, and worked there for many years, really learned the trade. And he in the early 90s, went in, partnered with some investors to open the Basque Cafe, which is on the square in Sonoma. And it was very successful, very, very popular place on the square. was a bakery, but also, a cafe. You could buy sandwiches, coffee, espresso, all that stuff, and it's still there. If you're ever in Sonoma and on the square, I would recommend that you stop by. And then a few years ago, he sold the Bass Cafe and he retired. And unfortunately, he didn't get to really enjoy his retirement for that long. And it's that's kind of the sad thing. I mean, he was very much into golf. He was very much into cycling. One of the things I learned, and kind of a common experience, I think, when at a funeral, is you learn things about people that you didn't know. He actually sponsored some cycling teams. That was something that I'd never known. Um, At any rate, a couple years into his retirement, just like maybe 2 years, he came down. Well, what we first thought was Parkinson's disease. His hand was shaking, and then a few years after that, he had. I mean, I guess the best way to put it is kind of a mental breakdown, and he was re-diagnosed, and he was diagnosed with what's called Lewy body dementia, Lewy, Lewy. And I'd never heard of that before. And it turns out it's the second most common form of dementia after Alzheimer's, and it oftentimes kind of presents itself initially as Parkinson's. Um, and one of the unfortunate things is, these days they can do a lot for Alzheimer's, physical therapy, speech therapy. There's new medications that can really prolong your life and keep it, a fairly quality life. Lewy body dementia, there's just not much they can do. I mean, once you're diagnosed, it's very, very common for people to pass away after 5 years, and that was kind of the case with Uncle Jack. He went downhill, unfortunately, quickly, and he left us too soon. He should have been here another 10, 15 years, and uh just to kind of, I guess, tell you what it was like growing up with him. I don't think he liked me very much when I was a small child, but as it would later turn out, and I confirmed this with some of my cousins, he didn't really like small kids. Period. I think he was a little afraid of them, and he was kind of short and curt with us when we were children. And then you'd turn, around age 10 or 11, and you'd start, expressing some interest in adult things. And it was kind of just like a light switch was turned on with Uncle Jack. And all of a sudden he was very cordial and friendly. You'd get the benefit of his very mischievous sense of humor. And and there was a real kindness there, kind of behind a little bit behind his outward personality. And I first kind of noticed this when I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, and this was still kind of before he really expressed that he liked me. Um, this was Christmas morning, and my brother had gotten this little toy piano, and my dad, for whatever reason, was not in a good mood that morning, and he'd gone outside. Uncle Jack came over, and while he was there, I sat on the stool for my brother's little piano, and I snapped two of the legs right off when I sat on it. And my mom was really upset. She's like, "Oh boy, when Dad sees this, he's going to be madder than a hornet." And I'm quaking in my slippers. I figure he's gonna go after me, and my my uncle Jack, he'll probably get in a few licks because he doesn't like me. Oh no! Uncle Jack picked up the stool, walked out to the garage, my dad's garage. Dad was not there at the time. Came back in like 10 minutes later. With a fixed, the stool had been fixed. He put some nails in it, and he said, "Yeah, I put some nails in it, I added some Elmer glue. Just leave it alone for about half an hour, and it should be just fine." And that was a big part of Uncle Jack. He loved to take things apart and put them back together. When it came to fixing things, building things, he was very good at that. And I kind of came out of that experience going, "Wow, who is this Uncle Jack? And why doesn't he show up more often?" I will just leave you here with a larger picture of my entire family. This was at my grandmother, Evelyn. She's the one right here in the center. This was her 90th birthday party, obviously. Um, this here, right here, this was Uncle Jack. He was next to my cousin Mike, and this is my Uncle Alan next to him. Next to Uncle Alan, that's me. This is my dad. This is Addie. This is the daughter of uh, my cousin Jeff and his wife Trish. This is my mom. This is my Aunt Joan. This is my cousin Tyler and my cousin Ryan. They are the sons of my Aunt Cease right here. And Uncle Dan. This is Uncle Mark. And my Aunt Linda. Their sons are Mike, Scott right here, then Jeff. And this is Scott's wife Angie. They now have 2 children of their own. And last but not least, well, kind of least, is my brother right here, Doug. Oh yeah, and his wife Melissa, my sister-in-law. So again, Uncle Jack, we will miss you, and you left us too soon, and I just if there's anybody out there who doesn't know what Lewy body dementia is, this and this helps him, well, I hope it does help you. God bless.